It was just after Christmas, in the quiet suburbs of Erith, southeast London, when the Blake family vanished without a trace. Sian Blake, a beloved mother, former actress, and voice of resilience, and her two young sons disappeared from their family home, leaving behind only silence and a lingering sense of dread. What began as a missing persons case in late December 2015 quickly escalated into something darker, something brutal, something that would haunt the public for years. And now, in 2025, a full decade later, this horrific story has resurfaced, reigniting media headlines, courtroom debates, and the fury of a public that has not forgotten. This is the chilling case of Sian Blake and the man who took everything from her. Sian Blake wasn't just any woman. Known for her role in the long-running British soap opera EastEnders, she had once graced TV screens across the country. But by 2015, she had stepped out of the spotlight and into the quiet world of full-time motherhood, raising her two beautiful sons, Zachary and Eamon. What most didn't know was that Sian was fighting a silent battle. In December 2015, she had been diagnosed with terminal motor neuron disease, a brutal illness robbing her of strength day by day. She had told friends she planned to move with her children to start fresh, closer to her family, but she would never get that chance. On December 13th, she and her sons were last seen alive. In the following days, neighbors noticed something strange. No one answered the door, lights were left on, and the family car was missing. Her partner, Arthur Simpson-Kent, told police she had simply left with the boys. But something felt wrong, very wrong. When police searched the home weeks later, they were met with a disturbing scene. Rooms stripped, furniture removed, the atmosphere eerily sterile. It was clear someone had tried to wipe the place clean. But the most chilling discovery came days later, buried in the backyard. The bodies of Sian Blake, aged just 43, and her two sons, aged 8 and 4, were found in shallow graves. All three had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and neck. The nation was horrified. But the man who should have answered for these crimes? He had vanished. Arthur Simpson-Kent, Sian's partner and father of the boys, fled the country just days after the family was reported missing. He booked a ticket and escaped to Ghana. For weeks, he lived in hiding until a global manhunt led Interpol and British authorities to a remote village where he was arrested. Extradited back to the UK, the trial that followed would be short and devastating. In 2016, Simpson-Kent confessed to all three murders. He pled guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning he would never be released. Or so we thought. In 2025, almost a decade after the murders, the Sian Blake case exploded back into headlines. A new legal team representing Simpson-Kent filed for an appeal, arguing that his confession had been coerced, that he suffered from undiagnosed mental illness at the time, and that the court had failed to consider his mental instability. But what shocked the public even more were his leaked prison interviews. In a cold, monotone voice, Arthur claimed, quote, "I didn't mean to hurt them. I lost control. I wanted to protect them from the world." End quote. The same world that now watches disbelieving, disgusted, and furious. Families of victims, campaigners, and members of parliament have slammed the appeal, calling it a disgraceful insult to justice and to the memory of Sian and her boys. The appeal is still pending, but few believe it will succeed. Yet the pain it has reopened for Sian's family and the British public is undeniable. Her sister told the BBC in a recent interview, quote, "He took my niece, my nephews, and now he wants sympathy? He deserves to be forgotten, not forgiven." End quote. Sian Blake's story is not just a tragedy. It's a brutal reminder of how domestic violence can lurk behind even the calmest of faces, of how monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they sit at the dinner table. Sometimes they're the ones we trust the most. And even now, 10 years later, the shadow of her story still lingers. In every courtroom that denies justice, in every appeal that reopens wounds, and in the silence of the house where a mother and her children should have lived long, peaceful lives. Sian Blake, Zachary, Eamon, 3 innocent lives taken in an act of cruelty wrapped in cowardice. May their story never be forgotten. May justice never be undone. And may we always look closer before it's too late.
The disappearance of Sian Blake and her 2 sons began as a routine missing persons report on December 16, 2015. At first, police didn't suspect foul play. Sian had reportedly told friends she wanted to leave London with her children to escape the stress of her illness. But something about the timing and the silence from her end deeply concerned those who knew her best. Early responses from the Metropolitan Police were criticized for being too passive. Officers initially accepted the explanation given by Sian's partner, Arthur Simpson-Kent, that she had left voluntarily. He claimed she needed, quote, space. Yet Sian's extended family and close friends were adamant. She would never vanish without contact, especially not with her 2 young children while suffering from a terminal illness. A week later, concerns deepened. The home appeared undisturbed, but lifeless. Mail was piling up. Neighbors noticed the family car was gone. Despite these red flags, it took over 2 weeks for police to search the house properly. When they did, the scene they found immediately raised suspicions. Inside the home, officers noted a clinical, almost sterilized environment. Personal items were missing, furniture had been rearranged, and cleaning agents were used in multiple rooms. Forensic specialists were brought in. Still, no signs of violence were initially discovered, just a feeling that someone had erased something. The turning point came when investigators began checking the garden. In early January 2016, cadaver dogs alerted to disturbed soil in the rear yard. Police began excavation work and soon uncovered a shallow grave. Beneath the soil were the decomposed bodies of Sian Blake and her 2 sons, wrapped in plastic, concealed with layers of dirt and branches. All 3 had suffered blunt force trauma. Their deaths were ruled as homicides. The discovery sent shockwaves through the department and the community. Arthur Simpson-Kent, now the prime suspect, had vanished. Investigators discovered he had fled the UK within days of being questioned. Flight logs showed he boarded a plane to Ghana on December 19th, just 3 days after police first spoke to him. Authorities were outraged. The Metropolitan Police worked with Interpol and Ghanaian police to locate him. Intelligence units tracked his movements through cell towers and money transfers. After nearly 2 weeks of searching, Simpson-Kent was found hiding in a coastal village in western Ghana. He was living under an alias and reportedly growing out his beard to avoid detection. He was arrested on January 9, 2016, and held in Ghana for extradition. During this time, he reportedly confessed to the murders in statements to Ghanaian authorities, admitting he had killed Sian and the boys during a, quote, moment of desperation. The confession, combined with the forensic evidence and his flight, sealed the case. In February 2016, Simpson-Kent was extradited back to the UK under tight security. During his trial, he pled guilty to all 3 murders. The court, citing the cruelty and cowardice of his actions, handed down a whole life sentence, one of the rarest and harshest punishments in UK law. Police officials later admitted that delays in the initial investigation may have allowed him to escape, a mistake they vowed never to repeat.
When Sian Blake and her 2 sons were first reported missing in mid-December 2015, the story barely made local headlines. At the time, she was remembered by many as the former EastEnders actress who had stepped away from the limelight years earlier. But as days turned into weeks and police delayed searching the property, concern turned to fear, and fear turned into horror. The UK media erupted after the discovery of the 3 bodies in the backyard of the family home. Major outlets like BBC, Sky News, and The Guardian ran front-page headlines, "Star of EastEnders murdered," and "Sian Blake and sons killed, partner on the run." Public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Many questioned why police had not acted sooner and why the warning signs had been missed. Social media turned into a battlefield of grief, rage, and demands for justice. Hashtags like "Justice for Sian," "Never Again," and "Protect the Vulnerable" trended across Twitter and Facebook. Activists pointed to systemic failures, especially around domestic abuse cases, and the lack of urgency in missing persons investigations involving women of color. Family members were vocal and brave. Sian's sister publicly accused the police of negligence, saying, "If they had searched the house sooner, they could have stopped him from fleeing. They failed her." The media followed Arthur Simpson-Kent's manhunt like a thriller. His escape to Ghana became international news. Journalists and photographers camped outside the Blake home, while Ghanaian press shared images of the remote village where Simpson-Kent was captured. The story took on global attention, covered by CNN, Al Jazeera, and news outlets in Europe and Australia. When Simpson-Kent was finally arrested and extradited, public satisfaction came with a bitter taste. The trial was swift, but it offered little comfort. His guilty plea avoided a lengthy court case, but also meant that the full truth behind his motives was never publicly explored. Many wondered, was it premeditated? Was Sian planning to leave him? Did he fear losing control? In the years following the sentencing, the story quieted, but never disappeared. Sian Blake's name became a symbol, a warning. Documentaries were produced. Podcasts analyzed every detail of the case, and her photo, smiling beside her sons, remained etched in the memory of a grieving nation. But in 2025, everything changed again. News broke that Arthur Simpson-Kent had filed a legal appeal from prison. His lawyers argued that his confession was coerced and that he had been suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness. The public response was explosive. Headlines like "Killer Seeks Freedom" and "Life Sentence Under Threat" splashed across British tabloids. Leaked footage of Simpson-Kent's prison interviews added fuel to the fire. In them, he showed no remorse, only denial and deflection. "I didn't mean to hurt them," he claimed. "I lost control." His words rang hollow to most viewers. He was quickly labeled the manipulative monster online. Sian's family condemned the appeal immediately. Her sister released a statement saying, "This man doesn't deserve a second chance. He didn't just kill, he destroyed a family, a future. Let him rot." The public echoed that rage. Over 100,000 people signed an online petition demanding the justice system reject any form of reconsideration. Activists and women's rights organizations took to the streets again, reigniting calls for stricter sentencing laws for domestic killers and mandatory protective measures in abuse cases. Media experts and psychologists weighed in on the re-traumatization effect such appeals have on victim families. As one expert told ITV News,
For survivors and grieving relatives, every appeal is like reliving the crime. It's not justice, it's a wound reopened. Now, in 2025, the Sian Blake case stands not only as a tragic story, but as a reflection of what still needs to change. A mother, 2 sons, and a justice system fighting to honor their memory while holding back a killer who refuses to disappear quietly.
It was just after Christmas, in the quiet suburbs of Erith, southeast London, when the Blake family vanished without a trace. Sian Blake, a beloved mother, former actress and voice of resilience, and her 2 young sons disappeared from their family home, leaving behind only silence and a lingering sense of dread. What began as a missing persons case in late December 2015 quickly escalated into something darker, something brutal, something that would haunt the public for years. And now, in 2025,